going. Thanks for joining on this rather warm afternoon. I'm not sure where you are, but it's red hot in Yorkshire. So I'm in my office, and yeah, the temperature's high. Because we've just got the three of us this afternoon, I don't normally jump into introductions, but actually, because we've just got a small number, it might be just worth us introducing ourselves in case that leads to some interesting chats and connections. So, Nefeli, do you mind starting with just a little introduction about where you are and what you do?
Sure, no problem at all. So my name is Nefeli. I have been working for a group of 7 hotels, Imperial London Hotels, and for the past 3 years. I am a training and development advisor there. I'm a team of 1, so I look after the overall learning and development activity, which is based on a blended learning approach. So it's anything from apprenticeships to e-learning to behavioral training, executive coaching, and any other ad hoc L&D requests. We're based in London, around Russell Square, so it's very central. And the hotels, although it's a chain, they're very diversified in terms of their clients and the culture and the type of guests we serve.
That's excellent. And what kind of L&D do you get involved with? Are you hands-on, or do you book the training, and do you deliver it in-house or externally?
I do. I'm an all-rounder, so I do pretty much everything from training coordination to engaging with key stakeholders to delivering the training, designing the training. If it's a technical training, so for example, first aid or something along those lines, then of course we bring external people in. So it depends on the topic basically, but my specialty will be around soft skills training interventions. So for example, customer service, sales training, that type of thing.
Ah, that's excellent. One of the exercises we'll get into as part of the webinar, I was going to call out to an example, so I might just tweak it a little bit based on what you said. If I'm clever enough, if I'm not, I won't be able to do that, but I'll try. Natasha,
Let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Why not? Natasha, over to you. A little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, hi, I'm Natasha, and for the last 5 years I've been working with a variety of, I'd say, startups and scale-ups of small to mid-size organisations, supporting the MD in either directly coaching the MD so that they are clear, they've got somebody that they can talk to and work with, because usually they're the only person in their board or their exec team, and also supporting them on team development, so perhaps collaborating with them on retention and development strategies, engagement strategies, getting people to be productive. A lot of these organisations, they're founded by one person, and then suddenly they might have between 10 and 20 people to manage, and they've never managed people before. So looking at how to set that up, structure that, and develop succession planning and progression for team members. So that's it in a nutshell. That's one of my ventures. My other is that I work with a community out in Liberia. I'm co-founder of an NGO in Liberia, and I coach the community on economic growth projects within their community with the long-term intention of them being able to sustain a school that they're building. So, so a bit of a dual role really at the moment.
Mm. And one thing I would pick up on in both your introductions is the fact that one of the key messages with Big Picture is about how we believe that we should be accessible to all in terms of people within the business of all backgrounds and knowledge and training and education. I think me being me, and it's kind of my product and I'm kind of threaded all the way through it, is that we give to people an opportunity for them to express themselves, because they will anyway. So they'll either do it internally in their own head or to their colleagues or to the people they trust. But actually, I think they've got a strong voice in terms of how the business is run. They're often there on the front line, particularly in the hotel industry maybe, and that schooling project, Natasha, that in those circumstances, I think it's really important to open up those communication channels to everybody in our community and give them the benefit of the doubt that they've got a voice and they've got an idea. So I think this big picture is very much a bottom-up tool, inside out, if you like, someone's called it. So it brings business change to the organization from an inside out perspective rather than an outside in and a top down. It's less of a kind of command and control. It's more, what do you all think? What do we all think? Let's have a really good conversation about it. And then we facilitate change through that route. And that's the kind of environment and the culture that we like to encourage. So I'm really pleased when I get the chance to do introductions, because I get to find out about you two and you get to find out about each other, and it's a good coming together. So the most important thing we can do on this webinar is make and do. And what I mean by that is, actually I want you to help me along and actually make some notes. So I don't know if did you get hold of the prop that I sent out?
Yep.
Ah, look at that. What amazing, amazing students you are. You've been very compliant and well behaved already. You'd be amazed at how people don't follow instructions. So I try to make it as clear as possible. So that's the most important thing. I'm going to ask you to play along, and we'll go through a bit of an exercise as we go through. Zoom is the software we're using. I really like it. It's really intuitive. I've loved this way of presenting the different faces, because it almost feels like we're together. There's a gallery view if you want to use that. I find that the most useful, and that's how we kind of keep the recordings, because I can see all your faces, and sometimes those kind of those clues, those noddings, the smiles, puzzled, not quite sure looks are really important. So that's great. And if you want to leave me any form of message or indication in the participant panel, I think that's to your right. So there's some form of indicator flag, but because again there's three of us, just pipe up and just let me know if there's anything. One thing I do ask for sometimes as part of the introduction is a kind of question that you might want answering. I don't know if that came out clearly through your introduction, or you just want to preempt me with the heading of return on L&D. That gives you a bit of a clue as to the theme. Is there a specific question that you could throw at me to try and answer, and I'll come back to it at the end?
Usually when it comes to the outcomes of L&D, one model that I have been using is the 4 levels of Kirkpatrick, which is a very classic model actually, but I would be quite keen to see how can we get to better results when it comes to level 3 and level 4, because I find level 1 and level 2 are relatively easy to demonstrate and to communicate the results to other stakeholders, but level 3 and level 4 I think they're a bit more challenging. So I would be interested to see what else is there, and if you guys have tried different things that could be useful.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a nicely, what a good specific question that is for me to pick up on as a bit of homework, maybe after the webinar, because one thing with Big Picture is we do things in a certain way because we feel it works in the room with people. So it's less academic and textbook based, although I have a background in business change and project management and people skills and things, but actually I only use things in Big Picture when I feel they work in a room, in a group. So it's always interesting for me to try and link those back onto some accepted framework, such as NLP or something like that. But actually, if it works in the room and feels right, then I run with it. And that's the design of Big Pic. But I like to link it onto things because it's a curious and interesting thing to try and do. So that's a really good reference and not one I've looked at before, Nefeli. So I'd really like to pick that up with you maybe afterwards. Natasha, over to you.
Sure.
For me, just looking at like the headline of what this session's about with the return on L&D, one of the things that consistently with, because of the types of organisations that I'm working with and where they're at in their life cycle, any type of investment in L&D, even if they see it as being valuable, can be something that it's a massive step for them. So I guess to be able to present to them different ways that returns on investment can be understood and I guess appreciated or valued would be helpful for me to just feel better place to put them at ease, that actually it might not be something where they see an immediate and it even might be such incremental small shifts in people's state that it's not actually noticeable, but there is a return on that still. So it's trying to get a little bit more scientific or less scientific even with presenting the value of return.
Yeah, I love that. And the balance between the focus on the individual and the business, we'll get into that in a bit, and how you kind of try and cross that divide. Just before we kind of get into the practical stuff then, and thanks both for that question, they're both things I can work with. My experience, as I mentioned earlier, a bit of a kind of spiel on Big Pick, couldn't get the engagement in the time that I wanted in the business change projects I was on. So I would come up in my book with lots of doodles and things, all my books covered in kind of pictures and black ink gel pen and lovely books. I like the feeling of getting to the essence or the center of something, and I used to use patterns, I used to use certain symbols, and I used to use ways of laying things out. And what I found was, when I did that in my book and on the whiteboard, people would start approaching it and pointing to it and using it for their own understanding, because they realized, I suppose in a self-indulgent kind of way, it was easier for them to get their message across if they started to adopt the framework they'd been given. So there was a bit of a language, giving them a language to work with. So basically, in 10 years ago or so, I took all those doodles and patterns out of my book, and I lifted them into a product, and the product became Big Picture, which is in essence a layout on the page which works. It's grayed out, as you can see from the prop. You write over the top of it, and the symbols then developed into these lovely kind of props, which we've got kind of here, not a particular way up. So basically I've got all these props lying around my office, which you can see behind me, of which there are 8. But actually we only look at 4 or 5 of them today just because of the time. The whole idea is, once you've got that at the center, that engagement and that conversation, you can play around with the kits, different sizes. It's all the same symbols, all of the same template. Big props, ones that lay out on the ground that you can walk into. I'm thinking, if Nefeli, you've got lots of space in your hotel, you might have a conference room where you could lay Big Picture out on the floor, and you would pick up these big props behind me, and you would represent, that one would be the measure symbol. So you would pick that up and walk into the Big Picture with it. You would then pick up a team symbol, a customer symbol, particularly in a customer type industry, Nefeli, where you are, you could step through using the customer as a customer journey, and it's very spatial and you start making natural connections. So basically I've taken that and put it into the kits, the workshops and the programs that we sell, but basically it's all based on the same thing. So I'm really keen to get into the return on L&D piece. Bit about 3 related experience points for me. We may have touched upon them already. One is that for me, training and L&D is sometimes detached from the day job. So I observe that you can go on a training course. This just came up in your chat, Natasha. Go on a training course and actually, well, that was great, but actually who's helping me relate that to my day job? If I've got some challenges and opportunities, how is that helping me? Some will be easier than others, but sometimes I think it's hard for people to piece that together, especially if they've got a lack of clarity about their role in the business and what good looks like. So we'll do a little exercise around that practical element of how Big Picture achieves that. Sometimes it's hard, touched upon this, to balance the needs of the individual and the business, and getting that balance right, because you want to develop the individuals, but you also want to make the business successful. So we'll go through a little exercise on how Big Picture does that. And then I think over time, obviously a return, I think you mentioned it, Natasha, it doesn't happen immediately. It happens over time. So I've got like a little dum-de-dum pattern, which goes along in time. And there's chances to go on further training, chances to do appraisals. And there's all these touch points. Some are formal, some are informal. But actually, the consistent thread should be weaved through, because you want the employee to be as productive as possible and stay for as long as possible in that role and develop themselves and be successful. And that's another one of Big Picture's key messages. So let's get started with the prop then. What I'd like to do, you can do one of 2 things. The first little exercise is You can use your own business if you want, because obviously that's the business that you know about, or you might be familiar with a client. But actually, I'm going to give you an example of a business that I've just made up, and I'll share with you my notes as I go through. So using Big Picture, this would be before any training has happened. So it could be in an event leading up to the training event, or it could be as part of the icebreaker in the morning of the training. So what you would do is you would put a big picture prop in front of the attendees, maybe in front of the individual, or you may put it in front of a small group. And you would ask them for how they see themselves in the business. This is all initially about them. And the reason we start with the attendee is because that's the thing they know most about. That's the center of their universe. So we're not going to indulge ourselves with giving them the latest board report or the latest key performance metrics for the business. We're going to start with them as an individual. So this company I'm going to talk about is called Game Maker. It makes games, basically. So on your Big Picture prop, you've got the place for the name. So just in the name there, under the Big Picture logo, just write in Game Maker. That's the name of the company. Or if you want to use your own business, you can do as well. And at the top of the page, there's an area of green shading, and that's where we write the purpose of the business. And the purpose of Game Maker as a business is we like to help people win. That's what they've come up with on their away day. So in that green shaded box at the top, we like to help people win, or some derivation of that, however you like to make your notes. And a couple of core values for Game Maker, and we often write core values in on the right hand side, is they're all about competition and social. So they make games, they like competition, and they like social. So this would be a way of getting the attendee in the training room doing something. Again, it's all about making and doing. So we'd get them. And this guy, I'm going to call him Mart, because that's me. This attendee works in customer care. So you'll see on the template on the right-hand side, with the right-hand side boxes around customer care. So what I would do is just take if you haven't already, tear off the team symbol from the left-hand side, which is the red symbol. And if you wouldn't mind, just tear that off and just put it into the customer care box with your own name, or mine if you don't mind. You could probably put your own name. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share with you, if you can see that, what I've actually come up with. You might have something like that, you might not.
Yep.
The whole purpose, I mean, if you want to compare again, because we're a small number, is the way I've described it, was that fairly easy to do, straightforward?
Yep. Yep.
So what we've done then, if you imagine all of the different types of people who might be in that training room, you have given them something just immediately to do. So they feel maybe they're there to do something, they're active, they're penny, they've got a hot pen, as I call it. I do things like scribbling on the page, and you can use that yellow line. I don't know if you noticed on mine, but you might not have a yellow pen handy, but I use a nice big bingo dabber, as I call it, which is a massive yellow pen, and that's about the customer journey. The customer is at the center of everything we do. So you could have a play around that. You would facilitate a session, and they're probably thinking at this point, how have we managed to come on a training course and we're actually not learning anything? We seem to be doing something, but I think that's a really good thing to start with, because what we're going to move on to next in the kind of second part of this is they would then go through the training that they're there to do. You would go through some exercises with the different big picture symbols, but actually it's just to get something on the board. If you imagine physically, they would take the thing that they've done to describe where they are in the business, and they'd just put it to the side. It would stay on the table or the board or wherever it is, because it's important to keep it in mind. But actually, you've set a bit of a scene. I think the statement you've made there is, you're here to learn something that will benefit you in the business, but actually we're really interested in where you see yourself in the business, and you might be able to second guess where that goes down the line, but actually you've got engagement of them, and you're going to then deliver the training to them. Now, we'll move into that. The training I came up with was because I work in customer care in this example, it was going to be some kind of consumer protection type training around maybe a bit compliancy. It's not the sexiest thing ever, but it was just one I was thinking about because I'm working with a client on consumer protection this week. The whole point there, you mentioned earlier, Natasha, it could be some soft skills or something like that that you bring in. So you would go through your session plan, describing the training, all the stuff that you would do before. And then at some point, if we move into the kind of second stage of the exercise, what you would then do is you would break at lunch or at the end of the day once the training is completed. And you would say, okay, let's go back to big picture. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you further questions about what you think of the business. So what you're doing is flipping the emphasis. You're going from the earlier exercise of putting the person at the center. What you're doing, you're raising it up to the whole business. And what you would do is you would ask for their view of how they see the business. So I'll give you some examples. One of the things they may be aware of is that they want to encourage through their marketing work more online sign-ups. So this company, I'll just throw some information at you, Game Maker, it has both an online and an old school kind of product. So it has an online product and an old school product. So in that center part of the template, you've got something there for delivery or operations. Within there, me as an attendee might say, well, if you facilitate this session right, I know that we sell online product and old school product. They may use their own language. They may not get it right. But the point is you're asking them about their perspective of the business. They may know that there's an operations manager and a marketing manager, and they may know they've got a challenge around these online sign-ups. So if I just share with you what I've gone through there, this is how, if you facilitate that conversation over a lot more time than we've had, by the way, but what you're doing is you're giving them a chance to leave themselves there, sat in customer care, and you are giving them that platform, that voice to give a description about what they think of the business from their perspective. So this is a bit more difficult for the two of you because I went through that information quite quickly. I suppose the question I would ask is, if you look at that on screen, can you see how I've kind of expressed myself in that particular way? Or is there anything on there that's a surprise that might require a little discussion?
I can see how you've walked through what you were saying to how you've then put it into these different chunks. You're getting the people to, if I understand this correctly, you're getting the people to observe what's going on in the rest of the business and where the challenges or where the opportunities measures lie.
Absolutely, that's absolutely right. And if you can imagine, I know it might be difficult to, because in this call, firstly, we're using tech because we're using Zoom because it's a webinar. Secondly, we are individually reacting to the paper. Our relationship is almost with the paper as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
If I can suggest that if you imagine you're in a group of 2 or 3 people, then basically what you would be doing by expressing what you think, something magical happens. Your colleagues start chipping in because you're all using the same page or you're all using the same board. So I can see a board behind Nefeli earlier, something really big on the board, maybe like this that I've got behind me. What naturally happens as humans is if we see somebody using the language that we understand and expressing something in a certain way, then we want to get involved in that and start maybe correcting things or expressing our view. But because there's only one representation of it, we have to have that conversation out. So it's bringing all those thoughts out from the team into a shared area. So you might start by giving every individual their own big picture, but in time, you might then converge that onto one place. So we talk about like emergent thoughts, or sending all the thoughts, brainstorming. But then what we do is it's a bit like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and the lights. They then come down and you focus on the one view, and that's the convergent element. And by doing that, you're resolving any differences in understanding. And we happen to use 8 different symbols to do that, of which we've just seen a few of them today. But we use a very straightforward template. Nothing ever changes, and the symbols never change. So whichever size or facilitation method you're using, you're actually able to bring that together. And often you end up as a facilitator sat at the back while the whole room are having it out and discussing and resolving differences, particularly if you're using very few symbols, because you might only use 3 challenge symbols. So then there's a scarcity, which leads to a natural resolution of any conflict. And because it's via a third-party prop, an inanimate object, it's easier to say, we don't think Bob's doing his job in marketing, via a prop, rather than directing that directly at him. So it might create an easier dynamic to unblock a logjam or something. So there is that. I'm really keen to crack on into the last section. So what we'll end with is, from an employee experience perspective, if you imagine that's what's happened in the room, what you would do either at the end of that session or immediately following, or indeed woven through any future contact, is revisiting this same representation, particularly to turn challenges into opportunities. So the example I was going to give, using your opportunity symbol that you've got one of on your prop, is that challenge around sign-ups online, it might be a bit contrived, this, but my point is, by going on some consumer protection training, I might have realized in that room that I've learned something that would help with marketing, and the marketing manager somewhere over there in the business, and suddenly I've got access to, firstly, being able to describe that, and probably via big picture, a way of contacting the marketing manager. I'm basically growing my horizons, because I was just working in customer care, but because I've had some consumer protection training, I know that's about treating the customer fairly, and I know that might help with online sign-ups. So I've tried to use an example where it's hopefully not too contrived, and I'll just show you my last picture here. So what I've done is I've taken that challenge around, if I just spotlight, just use this. You've taken my challenge here, and I've turned it into an opportunity here just by putting the symbol next to it. Mm-hmm. And actually what I end with is I bring them down into this list here. So, and I've used the arrows to kind of indicate where the connection, where it's come from. So I use the center part of big picture as a bit of a mind map brainstorming. And what I do is I use the opportunities list down here to encourage people to think about the absolute opportunity that exists and what the criteria is that they may follow up with. Now, that could be a mix of individual, we'll get back to that tension, the individual opportunities presented for them as people within their teams, but you will also get a mix of opportunities and challenges that are more to do with the business. So and the idea is, if you have identified those measures, I know you've only got one symbol on a very small A4 page, but back to the sizing issues, if you have the large big picture with all of these kind of measure symbols here, so you put like 10 out, what you get in rapid time, quick fire time, as a side product of that training session, is a whole load of business intelligence as to how people see the business, what they think the measures should be, and actually it natural filters through, because if it's rubbish and it doesn't work for other people, without being rude to them, you never lose their individual big picture. You just put it on the wall around, and then you agree a kind of ground truth, a single view of the business, which pretty much everybody in that room signs up to, because they were there, they were part of it. So we often get people to kind of sign the big picture and kind of say we were part of it, or take a picture with it. It's a bit like them signing up. So in terms of the return on investment of the L&D, what we've done there is a quick fire route through from giving them something to do when they enter into the room, which might take them by surprise a little bit, because they're there to learn about consumer protection. But what you're doing, you're buying them into a process, something that's engaging, something for them to do. It's putting them at the center of the process. It's turning the whole dynamic round. You're then running the training. So it's not disruptive in the sense of it's changing the way you deliver. But what it is doing is giving you an opportunity and a kind of refresh or helicopter view at various points. And it could just be at the end of the day to go back and see them and their training in the context of the business. And then what you're doing is over time, you're giving it a thread by which you can then revisit and come back to. So sometimes when I come up with these titles, I feel there's a little pang of guilt that they're such big topics, right? Return on investment on L&D is such a big topic. But what I do in the time that I've got with the tool I use and the experience I've had is give a specific take on that, which is a kind of cut through. It's like one thread through. I think it's hugely powerful, and it's actually, for the amount of effort you put in, the return is massive. And that's why I go up against these big titles, because I think with putting the engagement and the person at the center of everything, that's when the magic starts to happen. So that's kind of the practical exercise over. How do you feel about just a bit of, we're kind of on time and I like to keep these prompts. So Natasha, how did you find that?
I think what's interesting is how it sandwiches a training session. So you deliver the actual training, but you're sandwiching it on either side with one, who you are and as an individual and where you stand, and just sort of before you even start any training to come in with your organisational purpose and remind yourself of that is a good idea, just to ground you and anchor you. And then the other side of the sandwich, when you come out of the training, to be able to take a little bit of time to understand how you could apply that in the context of your work environment and the people that you work with. It's a useful exercise rather than just delivering the training itself, because the person then becomes responsible for the return on the investment.
Wow. You should work in my marketing team. You kind of said it. I like the kind of product design, so maybe we need to talk about that. You can write some copy for me. You can place my copy. That was perfect. I'm definitely going to capture that afterwards. That was amazing. Nefeli, from your perspective, you were following with interest there. From your perspective, how did you find the insight? It's just an insight.
Yeah, I really like this tool because it breaks down the silos between the different teams, I think. Yeah. And also it does help to make sure that people that may feel disconnected, like for example, we are a company of 1,200 staff members, and the chances are that the person who works at reception doesn't know who does our marketing campaign. So I think it's a great opportunity to bring people together and actually raise awareness within the teams. And I like how everything is aligned and we work together as one team to actually achieve that common purpose.
Fantastic. I just love it. I smile just because it's great. I mean, I am my product and the tool, so to hear other people talking about it and reflecting is the whole reason I'm in business. So the commercial and the business model side is secondary for me. It's joining up with like-minded individuals who have the same values, and that's what Big Picture's all about. I just leave you on, I mentioned earlier, what we actually sell, because some people get carried away with my enthusiasm and I actually forget to tell them what we sell. And I have failed on that before. So we do sell programs, workshops, kits. I've just brought up the Big Picture website. I'll only show you the kits page just to kind of get your eye in, but there's the kind of sample kit, the activity kit. That's an interesting one. That's where you've kind of got a rope-based product that you step into. If I just click on that, you'll see, because I'm just thinking, when you mentioned hotels and schools earlier, I've seen this work really well in schools and hotels because you've got a bit of space generally and you've got the hall. So this is all about stepping in and doing it, going up from kits up to workshops. We run workshops either in-house or we do open workshops that people can come to. And then programs is the old definition of what is a program. A program is a sequence of activities with a defined outcome. So we're not too prescriptive on that. What we do say is we specialize in people development programs, which puts the individual employee at the center with induction, training and appraisals. And alongside that, we do business development programs that puts the business at the center with a kind of as is and a to be of where the business is. So we're using the same techniques, the same core values, the same skills, and the same kits. But it's the method of facilitation. That's quite exciting for me because it's an adaptive framework, as you may have twigged today, and I think you've picked up on. It's an adaptive framework which, if you boil it down in essence to the smallest individual things you need for great conversations, the way you then build that back up through the workshops and the programs is basically we have some ready-made facilitation techniques and session plans, but actually it's pretty much always done in collaboration with the client, and it's actually what do we really want to do here, and then we rock up with our kit, and that's the way it goes. So I've run over a little bit. I absolutely really enjoyed that. I thought that was just it was a good chat. It was a two-way chat, and that's the way I like it. And I'm really appreciate your time this afternoon. And if we can pick up afterwards on your kind of particular questions, I'd like to do that, but I don't want it to overrun because I get told off for overrunning, so I'm going to close it down there. Is there anything just in kind of closing? I don't want to cut you off too early. Just thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, feel complete. Thanks. It's good.
Marvelous.
Yeah, very interesting input. Thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, bye for now. Have a great weekend.
And you. See you later. Bye, Natalie.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Natasha.